Hello and welcome to the Life by Design podcast, brought to you by Strategic. This podcast is all about helping you live your great life. Each episode will feature insights from our Chief Investment Officer, Doug Walters. In addition, we'll also have a guest interview. This week we have Greg Mattacola, Senior Advisor and Partner here at Strategic. Okay, we're here with our weekly insights with Doug Walters, our Chief Investment Officer. For those of you listening who aren't familiar, Doug and his investment team are responsible for our weekly insights article that's on our website, investstrategic.com. And the article basically takes a look at what's happening in the market from the week and our viewpoint on it at Strategic.
Yeah, and we like to tie it into our philosophy so you can understand how we think about the world.
Yeah. And I think for those of you who haven't read it, highly recommend it. In these podcast episodes, we'll basically touching on it a little bit and, covering a little bit of what Doug talked about there, but maybe expanding on different sections. And so if you want a larger view of Doug's insights, you can read the article every week. And so this being our first episode, Doug, I thought it might be interesting for you to kind of talk about and dive into evidence-based investing for the listeners. And it's something we talk about all the time. And sure. I know you've explained it in different various content, but let's get it started with that. What is evidence-based investing?
Yeah, we'll start at the highest level, right? Evidence-based investing is almost exactly what it sounds like. It's basing your decisions on academic research and empirical evidence. And you might think, of course, why isn't everyone doing that? But a lot of investing is much more akin to speculation. So we like to say we focus on science, not speculation. Yeah. And it's not about, I don't see it as about taking big swings. It's about trying to tilt the balance in your favor multiple times. So looking at a bunch of small opportunities to tilt that scale in your favor, and those add up to hopefully 1-2% outperformance over time. And if you can get that every year, it can add up to quite a bit. You're talking about, millions of dollars over the course of someone's investing career.
Yeah. And, it's very much too saying, hey, we know X stock or X thing is super hot right now, and we are maybe looking at it, but that shouldn't be your whole portfolio, right? Like you should go, like if Nvidia is way up, you're not going all in on Nvidia because the risk is so high that there could be a downside to that as well.
Right. There's multiple angles to answer that question. So one is diversification, of course. One piece of evidence that's proven time and time again is the importance of diversification, making sure you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. There is, though, an element of where you would want to own Nvidia. There's something called momentum, right? That also is evidence. Stocks that go up tend to continue to go up. Again, you wouldn't want that to be your whole portfolio. You want to be diversified. But hey, momentum is something that potentially you could be including in your portfolio, along with these other things we call factors. Mm-hmm. So one you'd be really familiar with probably is value. Everyone's heard of value investing. Value is a factor. Momentum, like we've seen in Nvidia, is a factor. High quality is a factor. We like to have a diversified set of factors in our portfolio. These that are, again, evidence-based, proven, persistent over time, again, that hopefully can add a bit of performance to your portfolio.
Right. That if we took it from the viewpoint of strategic and in our plan, we talk about the great life. Like we ask all of our clients, like, hey, what's, when you're retired, you close your eyes, you think about day to day, what's your great life look like? And through the evidence-based investing, we're incrementally getting them to that great life. Safely, securely.
Right. Yeah, with we like to say with confidence and clarity, right? We want to make sure that everyone knows exactly how we're thinking, why they own what they own. They should be able to know what it's worth today. If we need to get out of it, they should be able to get out of it today, right? So just giving them that confidence that there's logic, there's reasoning behind everything we do. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that logic and reasoning leads to excess performance that gets them to that great life even faster.
Yeah. And so I think we touched on it a little bit, but how does that compare to like speculative alternative?
Yeah, the way I like to think about it, it's based on what we know today rather than what we think might happen in the future. So anytime you're talking about forecasting, whether you're forecasting companies' earnings or what the economy is going to do over the next 6 months, you're talking about the future. And the way I see it, the only way you see the future is with a crystal ball, and we don't happen to have one. So we like to focus on what we know today, right? We know those factors work. We know diversification works. We know that there's a lot of behavioral biases that can enter into investment decisions. We want to make sure we don't fall into those pitfalls. So it's about acting on what you know, not what you think.
Yeah, and I'm very excited for folks at home. You're going to hear over the next few episodes, and specifically later in this one, we're having Greg Mattacola on. We're going to dive deep into behavioral finance and talking about emotions and how they can drive our decisions. So really excited about that.
Yeah.
And for us individually, but also, I think that's something that affects individuals, but that can also affect companies as well. And groups of people, and you start getting into this herd mentality of like, oh, this is doing really well, we all should jump in on this, and it's not always the case, right?
Right, exactly. And the beauty of we actually in a way love these behavioral biases because that is how we can add value, and it is the reason why most of those factors we talked about worked, whether it's value, momentum. Those are based on behavioral biases. Why do momentum stocks work? Because of that herd mentality that that follows these stocks up and chases them. Yeah. Well, we want to capture a bit of that herd mentality.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so I think one of these biases too that we will talk about with Greg, but is the starting bias of like, hey, and this is something I know you want to speak about today, is like, when somebody first starts, they think they may be really smart because they made some good plays and they made all this money and they did something really genius like, and how that plays into the long term. And so, I know this last Weekly Insights was really interested in covering that. And so,
yeah. Well, thanks. So we talked about geniuses and how when market's going up, everyone feels like a genius, right? You can't make a bad move. And, I have to say I was one of those geniuses. When I first had money to invest, this is back in the mid to late 90s, which is right about when the dot-com bubble was taking off. And sure enough, I felt like a genius, just like everyone else in the world around me did. Didn't seem like we could make a wrong move until we could, and the market collapsed. And even an index, relatively broad index like the NASDAQ, fell 80%, right? So suddenly, we had eggs on our face as these geniuses, and we found out, in fact, we weren't geniuses. We were just following the herd. And that really, that back then I was an engineer, hadn't quite made my transition to finance yet, but that really did shape my thinking as an investor and really started my journey towards evidence-based investing. Didn't hurt that, being an engineer, being, in science, certainly also helped shape my thinking that I'd rather be calculating than speculating. So, really interesting topic, and I think really quite timely. We've had a U.S. market driven by the Magnificent Seven that just seems to go up and up. We're starting to see, some cracks in that. And this year to date, U.S. market really is flat. One of the things I would point to in terms of evidence-based investing and what we've learned from those days, when I was a genius, is the importance of diversification. Yeah. And, there's been a lot of resistance in portfolios to be in small cap stocks, which haven't performed as well, to be in international, emerging markets, and other asset classes that have lagged these Magnificent Seven. In fact, we've seen a lot of portfolios come into our house that, managed by others, significant concentration in U.S. assets. We prefer, and the evidence shows you should be much more diversified than that. We're starting to see that play out this year. International stocks are up 10, 12%, emerging market 4%. gold's up 10%, bonds are up. Really, the only thing not up right now is U.S. equities. Yeah. And I'm not saying we predicted that. We didn't. Yeah. But we were prepared.
Right. Well, and it's always hindsight, right? Yeah. When something does well, you're like, see, I told you. Right. Yeah. And so when thinking about this, and for folks at home that, are clients of ours or looking at the market, I think tying it to that also in this world of news cycles and the internet, that a lot of times we can get hung up on what the hot commodity is in the moment, right? And I know like forums like Reddit and the news really drive these home to people, and the GameStop years ago is a perfect example of how this can happen. And so what would advice be for you for those folks who are going, oh gosh, this XYZ stock is way up, like, or I heard from my nephew who's on Reddit that like this is going to be the next big thing. Like, how do I handle that as just a regular Joe and thinking about that?
Yeah, I think you really have to tune it out and ignore it. And I'd like to separate, sort of two trains of thought. Yeah. We're trying to get people to their great life. We're trying to invest their assets for their retirement or goals, whatever it is, way down the road. And, we want to be deliberate. We want to seek out those advantages in the market systematically. That is very different than, what's hot today and speculating. Yeah. And I don't discourage people if they have play money from doing that, because it can be a lot of fun. But you really need to segregate that part of your portfolio, the play money, from the portion of your portfolio that's trying to get you to that great life, that retirement, whatever it is down the road that you're looking forward to. Right. That needs to be a much more well thought out process, deliberate, in our opinion, evidence-based. And, I would just say, again, tune it out if you can.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's like you don't spend your mortgage money on play, right? You don't
right, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's super interesting. And so do you find like the timeline for folks should be looking out 10, 20, 30 years when I'm looking at my portfolio, for instance, like what's a good timeline that I should start looking at and going, oh, okay, I can kind of see the pattern and see what's happening with evidence-based investing.
Yeah, I would say at a minimum, you need 10 years. Think about a typical type cycle. I think over time, they've proven to be about 10 years. So 10 years would be, I would say, the minimum, which seems like a lot, but that's just the reality of it. Yeah. Most of us, when we think about our career in investing, trying to get to that great life, we have more than that, right? We have 20 years, we have 30 years. And for most of us, it's not just that retirement date. You don't stop investing the day you hit 65. Hopefully you're investing till that last day and then thinking about passing that legacy on to your kids. So investing can be almost, have an infinite timeline. That's why you really need to think long term.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the topics that I've seen us bring up a couple times, especially with that, is a lot of us, when we think about retirement or like how long we're going to live, I mean, we're speculating at that point, but saying like, oh, I don't know, maybe 75, maybe 80, but really you could live to 100. And so you kind of have to be prepared for that, not only for, for future generations, but just for yourself to continue living that great life that you've designed in your head.
Right. Yeah. It certainly doesn't stop at 65. And hopefully that's when, the real fun starts.
Yeah. So is there any like headlines or thoughts about maybe this past week or the week coming up or anything that you want to talk about in regards to that?
Yeah, I think the last week and the week coming up, we've seen a lot of market movement, a lot of market uncertainty. And I would say, it's really important during these times not to let emotions get the better of you. Most bad investment mistakes are made through emotion. So separate yourself from the news if you can. Continue to think long term. Continue to think patience and trust in the process, right? If we're investing evidence-based process for a reason, we trust it, we believe in it, we feel like we are prepared for whatever may come. we're not going to be investing based on emotion or the headline of the day. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so really encouraging folks that, like, if they want to check in, maybe it's more annually than day to day.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that those that are managing their own portfolios, that the less you look at it, the better it does.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else we want to cover? No?
That's all I have.
All right. Well, thanks, Doug, and we'll see you next week for our next insights.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Have a good one.
I'm here with Greg Mattacola, our very first guest on the Life by Design podcast. I'm very excited about this. Greg actually works here at Strategic. He's a senior advisor and partner. Greg is also certified financial planner and practiced law for 20 years prior to coming to Strategic.
I did. 7 years in recovery.
Yeah, so I think having Greg on first is great. We have a wonderful topic today, and Greg, I think it's great for not only your clients but for our audience here on the podcast. All that experience is going to come into play, and we're going to be able to hear about that. And I'm really excited about that.
This is fantastic. I'm really excited to be here. I'm thrilled that Strategic is rolling this out. I think it's going to be great for our clients and for the public at large. Very excited.
Yeah, I me too. This is probably one of my favorite things I've done so far.
Awesome.
So, but yeah, so let's talk a little bit before we get into our topic today. Kind of what guided you to the move from practicing law into becoming a financial planner?
Sure. It was a very there was no grand master plan in terms of how it happened. It was very organic. I was practicing law, and in the course of my law practice, came in contact with lots of financial planners when I was doing estate plans for my clients. And I was seeing the same cookie cutter approach over and over, and not great follow-up and not great kind of comprehensive planning.
Mm.
And then I began to have a few clients in common with Strategic, and I saw a very different approach. It stood out markedly from the rest, and I liked it. It was very client-focused, very proactive, very comprehensive. It was very similar to how I had always tried to model my law practice. It was the first financial firm I found that had a very common service delivery and way to treat clients. So that was the first thing I think that came, kind of popped in my mind was, wow, these guys are different. Then I got to know them and many of the advisors here. Got to know Alan and people like Mike McGraw and Aaron Evans and Francesca, and just all great people. That stood out. And then lastly, I had been practicing for 20 years. I had done a number of things throughout that time, small firm, big firm, started my own business. I was an in-house counsel attorney to a healthcare organization, just lots of different things. And I was ready for a change. I wanted a different challenge, a new challenge. I've always liked finance. It always interested me. I always kind of was on the periphery of it, in terms of things that I was doing for my clients. So I thought, well, it's just really a similar vocation in the sense of it is service first, client centered, their well-being above all else. So very similar vocation, very similar themes, just a different subject matter. Yeah. And I was ready to take on that challenge, and it's been now over 7 years, and I haven't looked back. It's been a tremendous career shift.
Yeah, well, and I think, not to continue to talk up the company we work for here, but right. but before we get into our topic, but I think that's one of the nice things about Strategic and kind of their thoughts on hiring is hiring the right people and getting them into Strategic so that they can take care of folks that are clients here, and that sometimes the background may be different than financial planning, but it's worth having those people in here because they have experiences and thoughts and feelings about how people should be treated, and so we bring in the right people, which is, I think, cool. And it's cool talking to everybody here and all the different backgrounds that they have. So that was a little bit for me to hear Greg's background. I hope the audience enjoys that. But yeah, the real thing we're here to talk about, and ideally Greg and I will be talking about this over the next several episodes, is understanding behavioral finance. And Greg and I, before we start recording today, we were just talking about how in terms of when we recorded this podcast, that it's very relevant. And so, I think it's a good topic for those at home, and kind of ties in a little bit to the larger scope of what strategic and our investment team really focus on here as well. And so, yeah, I guess I'm just going to open up, Greg, because I know you're very passionate about this. And what is behavioral finance?
Well, I think at its most basic form, right? Behavioral finance is the study of emotions and different behaviors when it comes to financial decisions. And to me, that is at the basis of virtually everything that we do. It is very easy to make decisions in a vacuum, right? With no external factors or stressors or anything kind of weighing you down, right? But that's not how life works. That's not how people go about their day, right? When our average client, any investor, is going to have at any point in time a number of things coming at them, right? They both related to their finance and unrelated. So they're going to pick up a newspaper. If people still pick up newspapers anymore, they're going to look
I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so, but
debatable.
maybe.
Dating myself a little bit with that. I still pick up a newspaper now and again. They're going to look at their phones. They're going to log on their tablets, their computers. They're going to see all kinds of information coming at them about the market, about politics, about what's going on in the world, about what's going on domestically, and that will play on their mind. They may have something going on, a personal struggle. That's going to weigh on their mind. All of these different things affect people's emotions, and those emotions play into decisions. So the traditional finance theory, expected utility theory, goes off the basis that people are going to act rationally at all times. They're going to use all available information to them. They're going to sift through all that information. They're going to come to the most rational, evidence-based, calm, proven, optimal decision. That's kind of the classical classical finance model.
Yeah.
But what's been proven is that is not really the case, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
We all don't do that because for a number of reasons. And some of those are emotions. Some of those are personal biases that we have and fall into, time constraints, all those things play into how we make decisions. So in terms of what we do for our clients and how we guide our clients, it's really important to be aware of how emotions and external factors play into that decision-making process, because it'll help us, relate to our clients better, understand our clients, be able to communicate information more effectively to them, and help kind of bring them back to a more kind of level emotional ground in terms of decision making.
Yeah, and have you seen, so from my side of the fence, from a marketing and content creation, living on the web for many years, I think there's been a marketable increase in clickbait, fake news, and I don't mean that in any other way except for actually fake information, whether it's AI generated or, you know, I'll be honest, I'm a huge Disney fan. So the big one that I fall for is always like, this ride at Disney World is shutting down. Everyone's angry. And then I like, oh my God, which one is it? And I click on it and it turns out nothing. It's like a garbage can they're taking out of like one of the alleys. But yeah, so like, have you seen over the last 7 years that you've been doing this, maybe this increase in that sort of emotional sensitivity because of how the internet works, how social media works?
I have, for sure. And maybe somebody who's been in this field for 20, 25, 30 years will say it's always been there.
Mm.
But I just feel that the onslaught of information coming at people all of the time, right? And from all different sources, all different mediums, just phrase on their, emotional stability. It leads them down paths that they don't need to go down. And we see it in all forms, right? We have some clients. I saw this on TikTok. I saw this on Fox News. I saw this on MSNBC. What do you think about it? We get questions from derived, that had their origin from so many different sources. And just like you say, it's impossible for people to know what's legitimate.
Yeah.
And we get that question a lot too. Like people will send screenshots and snippets. Is this true? Is this legitimate? Is this, is this credible? And I just think it's increasing tenfold every day. And really what it's designed to do in some shape or form is, either towards ad revenue, right? I mean, the clickbait, that's how they sell. That's how they make their money, or to get you to buy something. There was the saying in a documentary about social media: if the product is free, then you're the product.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, so
100%.
if you're on Instagram and it's free, if you're on TikTok and it's free, I mean, you're actually what's being sold.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that leads us, into our main topic for this episode is heuristics, right?
Yep.
And how that works. So maybe for those at home, which I'm assuming most won't know exactly how this ties into behavioral finance, but can you kind of explain to us what heuristics are and what the different types are that play on our behaviors and our decision?
Sure. Right. I mean, it goes to that definition I gave before of behavioral finance or prospect theory, right? Which is in contrast to that classic finance model, expected utility theory. And what it is folks are taking shortcuts and, basing decisions not on all available information and sifting through and making the most rational and optimal choice. Instead, they're taking mental shortcuts, which is what a heuristic is, right? It's making a decision based on a limited amount of information or a perception versus, sitting there and taking that classical all available information, rational approach, right? So an example is like there's a trust heuristic. We all use that probably pretty regularly. And that is making a decision based on information you got from what you perceive to be a trusted source.
Yep.
Right. So if you, if you get something out of Forbes magazine, right, and it states that XYZ fund or XYZ stock is likely to do well this year, and there's another author, similar article out of USA Today that opines something different about that fund or stock. A trust heuristic would lead you to take the word of the author, the writer in Forbes, because it has that financial pedigree, right? The rational, old school, expected utility approach would be to investigate both, see which author, which writer knows what they're talking about more, which one is more credible. The trust heuristic, the shortcut, oh, it's in Forbes, it must be true, right? That trusted source, right? So we all use that. It could be people that we trust. It could be news sources that we perceive to be trustworthy. Those are all those mental shortcuts that we use in making financial decisions.
Well, and I think it's a lot of decisions in our everyday life. Like, I'm sure we've all, when you were talking about this, the first thing I was thinking about is like, oh, I have this buddy that told me some line about something, and I was like, oh, and then I just took that information, stored it, and I was like, that's true now because it came from this guy that I super trust. And then you're on the internet one day or like looking at something, you're like, oh, that wasn't true at all. Like, you're just like, what was going on? But he heard it from a trusted source as well, so then he passed it on, and like it's just this innate human thing that we have where these heuristics apply, right? And there's many
100%.
different ones, but that's a big one.
It is a big one. And that one kind of plays into or leads into herding, right? Which is just following the crowd, right? That's another shortcut. If you see hundreds and thousands of people going one way and doing one thing, well, geez, they can't all be wrong, right? So you follow that crowd. And it's that herding behavior that we've seen and throughout history in finance that has directly contributed to some of the bubbles that we've had, right? And oh geez, everybody's jumping on these .coms. I need to jump on this, or I'm going to be left out of the party. That that doesn't necessarily lead to rational, well thought out decisions. It's more, hey, they're all doing it. It must be okay. Let me follow suit.
Or sometimes, like I had heard recently about like some experiment. I don't remember the details, but the broad strokes was there was only one person in the experiment that wasn't in on it. Everyone else came in, they saw something, and they were like, oh, it's blue, when it was clearly green. And then that person comes in after hearing everyone else say it was blue and was just like, yep, it's blue, when they knew it was green.
Right.
And, that's a simplification and like probably not exact details, but that's the idea, right? Is where instead of doing it because everyone doubted it and you thought that was the right answer, it almost is like, well, I don't want to be the one that was wrong. Like, maybe I'm messed up and I like.
Well, it takes a tremendous amount of confidence, right, to be the objector.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it goes back to that old, right, the old parable or story, however you want to describe it. The emperor with no clothes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
The whole, everybody's going along. Oh, isn't he dressed beautifully? Isn't such a splendid array? And one kid pipes up, he doesn't have any clothes on. Right. So, I mean, think of the housing market crisis in 2008. Seemingly all of these people were in on this phenomenon, right, of these collateralized mortgage products. And going back to that trust heuristic, right, that's another one. Rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's, that's another thing that people rely on. That's a trust heuristic. That's a mental shortcut. Well, they rated it AAA. It must be amazing.
Yeah, right.
Well, that was going on then, right? All of these, all this, the whole herd was taking part in this, financial product. And it was a select few that were betting against it, right? I mean, it's embodied in that Michael Lewis movie about it all. And it takes a lot of courage to stand up and say, this isn't right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's that rational investor.
Yeah.
So that's really what it comes down to. And I think that's one of the greatest values that we can provide people is kind of getting people to take a breath in the wake of, or in the face of, I should say, chaos or noise that's coming at them. Getting them to slow down, take a breath, and look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Right. And look, long term, show them, a kind of a classic approach to kind of combating, knee jerk short term reactions is, hey, let's look at what the market has done over the last 50 years, 100 years. Let's show what a diversified portfolio can do over that amount of time. It's been through all sorts of noise, all sorts of events. And let's get back to kind of that evidence-based approach, really. And that's really, I think, a big part of what we do is just being that, voice of reason.
Yeah.
And, calming effect. If we're doing our jobs well, I think that's what we should be and should be providing.
Well, and I think overall, and our listeners here are gonna hear Doug talk about this a lot over the next however long for the podcast, but our evidence based investing and really trying to equate it in my head, is that like I think about it with this is another very topical thing with all the snow we've been getting lately. If we get a little bit of a leak in our roof, I don't burn the roof down and like change. I just
That's
fix
right.
that little leak, and then my roof is still good. It was just something happened in that little one
Right.
area, right? And
That's
then
right.
and so I'm just fixing that one shingle, or if I have a metal roof, just screwing in that one screw to make sure it's not leaking anymore. I'm not tearing the whole roof off and starting over. And so I think, it's hard because, hey, for all of us, finances are very tied to our emotions and our well being and our family's well being. So sometimes it's very difficult when you see a dip or you hear something or hear a news item, whether it's real or not real or whatever it is. It's very hard to disconnect from that and go, oh, no, I'm okay. I'm going to look at this over the next 10 years, right? Like that's not a thing that I think day to day we really.
It doesn't come easy.
Yeah.
It does not come easy to us. And, that's really what we can provide is that see the forest kind of viewpoint. It's easy to get caught up in the trees, right? It's easy to get, focused on the smaller minutia or letting emotions kind of carry us away. Interestingly, being completely devoid of emotion isn't necessarily the answer either, right? A little emotion can be good in the decision-making process, but what studies have shown is it's intense emotions, intense reactions is where you can overcorrect, overreact, and really cause damage to your investments and kind of long-term goals.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think overall, if you're sitting at home and like me, it takes me a little bit more to think about the market and financial trends and all of that stuff, as I'm on the marketing team. But, I think part of it is just thinking about everyday life items and going, okay, is this spoiled or is this done now because this one small thing happened? Or am I just going to tend to that one small thing and move on? And if you look at your everyday life, whether it's raising your kids or, whatever it may be, you go, okay, no, I'm in this for the long term.
That's right.
And I want them to be this like great adult if we're talking about our kids. And just because they like threw their truck today as a 2-year-old doesn't mean that, that's it, it's done. And so
That's right.
and I'm trying to equate that to like everyday items. I hope no one feels like I'm talking down. It's just, that's just how I see the world and try to like go, okay, this news or this market thing's happening. I need to take a step back away from this and go, based on what we're doing here, we got it handled. It's just very emotional right now. So maybe I need to step away from it and think about what that looks like for me. And
look at nutrition and fitness. And that's an area of life that I always liken and compare this to, because I think there are a lot of similarities. There may be debate about which diet is the best and which way of eating is the best and all those things, but there is very little debate about the basics, right? In the sense of, if you want to be healthy and fit, there needs to be a certain amount of movement on a weekly and daily basis in your life. You need to, for the most part, be eating clean. Maybe you're Mediterranean, maybe you're pescatarian, maybe you're more meat-based, whatever the case may be, right? But it's single ingredient foods.
Yeah.
It's foods in moderation. A good protein source, a good carb source, fruits, vegetables. Avoid processed, and keeping caloric intake to a moderate reasonable level. There's really not a lot of debate about those things. And if you're on one of these plans, if you're on if you are on a fitness journey and want to be, trying to get to a goal, it is never a linear, no backslide path, right? There's going to be a day where you don't eat clean.
Yeah.
You might have a cheat meal. You might have a celebration. There might be something where you slip. If if you grow up like me, if you grow up Italian, you eat your feelings, right? You have a terrible day.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You go home. You go home, and that might be the day where you eat half a loaf of bread.
We're ordering pizza tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. Do you throw the baby out with the bathwater just because you had that one slip up? No. The very next day you get back to your basics, right? You say, okay, wasn't my best night. Let me get back to it. The same goes with the market, and the same goes with your approach to finances. Whether it's your budget, whether it's your investments. If there's a step back, there's going to be step backs. You've seen it recently. Not every day has been a green day, right? We've seen some volatility in the market. That's part of the normal cycle. It doesn't mean that you deviate from that rational, thought out plan, right? You don't just say, "Oh, I'm selling it all." We had four straight bad days. That's the worst thing you can do, right? So it's staying calm and kind of keeping to that long-term plan. And trying to combat your biases and kind of and fight those behavioral things that pop up that might lead you to a bad decision. And this is something that I think in all areas of life that is going to be, in all career fields, I think the difference maker going forward is that emotional intelligence aspect of the job, because AI is real and AI is going to change a lot of things.
Yeah.
But that emotional intelligent quotient, that factor, whether, no matter what the field, and particularly in this one, providing clients that emotional stability, providing them that voice of reason, I think that is going to be a big differentiator. Already is.
Yeah, I think so. And hopefully, this helped you kind of think about that, and hopefully that gets you in the right mindset. And then for next week, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some direct kind of paths for better decision making while we're recognizing these biases. So I hope you guys liked the beginning of this conversation. Greg's coming back with me next week, and we're gonna continue the conversation. So,
awesome.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Please see the full disclosure in our show notes for more information.